if you're not moving forward in life, you're moving backwards. There's no such thing as staying in the same place and being spiritually stagnant. If you're not going up the spiritual ladder, you're going down. And one of the incredible places we see this is from a passuk in this week's parasha. Indeed, the very first mitzvah in the Torah given to the Jewish people, and a tragic story of what happened to one of the greatest Tanna'im, the sages of the Mishnah, who was so famous, yet we hear so little about. His name was Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. Anyone who's learned the ethics of the fathers, Pirkei Avot, knows in chapter 2, the greatest student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was indeed Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. Abba Shaul says that if all of the other students were on one side and him on the other, he would outweigh them all. And every time he opened his mouth, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, he knows what he's talking about. The Avot Rabbi Natan speaks about not only in learning was he the greatest, but also in his ability to understand people, to comfort people. There was nobody like Elazar ben Arach. Yet we hear about him only in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, and we almost never hear about him in the Talmud. He's never quoted. What happened to this great man? And incredibly, the tragedy was as follows. The Gemara in Masechet Shabbat Kuf Mem Zayin 147 says that all of the rabbis, we know historically, went to Yavne. That was the place of the sages where they were growing and writing and becoming the leaders of the generation post the Churban. Where did Rabbi Elazar ben Arach and his wife choose to settle? In the town of Diamses. Some say is Emmaus in the Park Canada area, Balatrun, was a Roman city with the greatest hothouses. And he went there, so to speak, to take life easy, to semi-retire, to enjoy the good life, while the sages were toiling and growing. And incredibly, the tragedy was that it came to reading the Torah, this week's parasha, chapter 12, the beginning of all of the mitzvot, where the collection, the great beginning of the collection of mitzvot, spiritual commands in the Torah, appear this week. And we all know what's the first mitzvah in the Torah given to the Jewish people. HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodeshim. This month of Nisan is for you, the beginning of all months, the Jewish calendar. Rosh Chodesh, the lunar calendar, all begins in this week's parasha. And instead of reading the words HaChodesh hazeh lachem, this month will be for you, the Gemara says he read the words HaCheresh Haya Libam. He mixed up the Dalet and the Resh. He mixed up other letters of such an elementary verse. And instead of reading, this month will be for you, he wrote that their heart will be closed, will be mute. The sages davened for him. They couldn't believe that the great Rabbi Elazar ben Arach almost couldn't read psukim and elementary psukim. And they davened for him and his learning was returned. And what do we see? That no matter how great you are, no matter what your personal capacity and God-given gifts are and learning is, you cannot rest on your laurels. If you decide to put your feet up and have a different focus in life, and you're not focused on making a difference and growing and be the best you can be, then even Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, the greatest of all, can become a person who can't even read HaChodesh hazeh lachem. The degeneration, morally and spiritually, can take place very quickly when we're not focused on ongoing growth. And may we all be able, through HaChodesh hazeh lachem, this month will be for you, the beginning of all months, a month of hitchadshut, of regeneration. The new moon of always regenerating itself. The month of Nisan in the time of spring in the northern hemisphere, always regenerating itself. Instead of our hearts being mute, when we don't grow, being constantly committed to spiritual renewal, learning from the example of Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. And may our lives always be lives of hitchadshut, of renewal. Because ultimately, when we focus on ongoing growth, we renew ourselves, we regenerate ourselves, and magical spiritual things happen. Shabbat Shalom.